the newsagents.
So, and then the next thing we'd like to do is to announce today's winner of the $1 million prize. So, it's Christine Fischel. Would you like to come up? Oh, up there? Okay.
That's Elon Musk giving away $1 million, just an ordinary day in Muskland. You'll remember that Trump himself started life as a game show host on The Apprentice, and now it seems the genre is back in fashion. This time, they're just trying to fix an election.
Who wouldn't want to win $1 million? But the US legal system is clear. You cannot pay someone to vote for someone else, and you cannot pay someone to register to vote. So how is what Elon Musk is doing possibly legal? Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John.
It's Emily.
And between now and polling day, 2 weeks away, or 2 weeks tomorrow, Tuesday, Elon Musk has come up with this lottery raffle prize where for the next tombola to make it church fete like.
Yes.
You're going to win $1 million, which you never did at a church fete,
Not
every
yet.
day, but you have to be registered to vote. And that seems to fly in the face of the law of the land in America, where you can't pay someone to vote and you can't pay someone to register to vote. And there's a professor at UCLA, Rick Hasen, who has said the problem is that the only people eligible to participate in this giveaway are the people who are registered to vote, and that makes it illegal. Now, Elon Musk, this is just but one of the ways in which he is trying to put his thumb on the scales firmly for Donald Trump. And like so much that Elon Musk does, it seems to take him up to the edge of what is legal and maybe a bit beyond.
Yeah, I think there's two things in that, because you said at the beginning, you can't pay people to vote. You can't pay people to register. But what he's doing, he's found the loophole, which is, as you say, a sort of random raffle whereby if you register, your name might be called out. And if the prize is $1 million a day, who's not going to have a go? What makes it illegal is that it is aimed specifically at those in swing states. And there is a lot of deep unease because this is, as you say, heading into territory that is really grey, that looks as if Musk is not just using money, $1 million a day, but also using his megaphone via Twitter, X, whatever, to get the message out. I mean, one of the things he says is, how do we get people to know about this petition? Presenting the first winner with his wise. This news, I think, is really going to fly. It's not a problem how to get your message out if you're Elon Musk. And so you pull people into a place where they're on the register, you give them prizes in these swing states. He has now based himself in Pennsylvania. Musk has moved his operation to Pennsylvania, the swingiest of swing states. He's now pulled in some of his top brains, top workers on all his different business projects who are now working on the election. And I guess you will hear in the voice of Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, a man who is deeply worried by what's going on and also feels slightly unable to stop it. There is a futility in what he's kind of saying.
Governor, let me ask you about a development we learned about overnight. Elon Musk says he will be giving away $1 million every day to random voters who sign his super PAC's petition. You are a former attorney general. Is this legal?
I think there are real questions with how he is spending money in this race, how the dark money is flowing, not just into Pennsylvania, but apparently now into the pockets of Pennsylvanians. That is deeply concerning. Look, Musk obviously has a right to be able to express his views. He's made it very, very clear that he supports Donald Trump. I don't, obviously we have a difference of opinion. I don't deny him that right. But when you start flowing this kind of money into politics, I think it raises serious questions that folks may want to take a look at.
So you think it might not be legal, yes or no?
I think it's something that law enforcement can take a look at. I'm not the Attorney General anymore.
I mean, Jesus, honestly, the timidity of that answer. And I understand that because immediately he doesn't want to be seen to be on the side of somebody who's censoring, right? He knows that Musk stands for free speech, so he's kind of going, oh, well, I don't want to get in the way of his rights, right? He knows that he's a billionaire. Oh, I don't want to get in the way of what
You don't want
might
to
be
make
his...
Elon Musk a victim.
You don't want to make him a victim. You don't want to make him a martyr. And also, I think there's something much more fundamental here, which is like, how strongly do the Democrats believe that the rule of law is going to come to their aid at this point, right? I mean, they've already got Trump convicted, you know, in the New York case of 34 counts. They've already seen 2 other cases pretty much thrown out. They've already seen the Supreme Court come to his defense and offer him immunity for his actions taken as president in the wake of what we now know of January the 6th. And so, honestly, I guess they're thinking, well, so what if we prove it's illegal? Like, what then? What
exactly.
happens?
It's not going to make any difference.
It's not going to make any difference.
Between now and November the 5th. There is no way that the wheels of justice in America are suddenly going to spin so fast that they are going to say, Elon Musk, you've broken the law, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
So they're completely trapped between not wanting to exalt what Musk is doing to the point where everyone's now on his side because they think that he's a free speech martyr and saying, oh, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Everyone should be doing it.
It's really interesting. I've also seen a quote where Donald Trump has almost tried to put distance between himself, which is classic Trump tactic.
Him and Musk?
Yeah, he was asked about the scheme on Sunday and he said, oh, I haven't followed that. But at the same time praising Musk as a great man with a great touch and a great feel for what's going on.
Well, isn't this because the super PAC has got to not touch the president himself?
Yeah, so
it has to be.
So he says, "Oh, I didn't know anything about." But but the fact of the matter is, where this is smart politics for Trump and for Musk.
Yeah.
I mean, Musk, there's a kind of debate to be had about how smart this is because if Kamala Harris wins, he's absolutely. Which is,
I mean, that was his phrase.
Which is the phrase he used when he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson.
We're just quoting here, mothers everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need any excuse. You can say anytime you like.
My mother loves that.
Yeah, I bet she does. So I think that, where it's smart politics is the big doubt about Trump in this election campaign is whether he has got the ground game of the Democrats and the Democrat ground game. And if you're talking about really tight margins in very tightly fought swing states that are hyper-polarised, if you can get a few thousand more people to register to vote, and Kamala Harris had Taylor Swift, who was offering no money to do it, but she was saying, go and register. He is offering $1 million to go and register for all those people to get off their fat asses, again quoting Donald Trump, to get off the couch and go and vote for fat husbands. Yeah.
Maybe we should just play that clip here. This is Trump's rallying call, literally at a rally, to the women to get their husbands to vote.
We can do all of this and more, but patriotic New Yorkers must get your asses out to vote. Gotta get up. Gotta get up. Harry, get up, Harry. Harry, get your fat ass out of the couch. You're going to vote for Trump today, Harry. Get up, Harry. Come on, let's go. Let's go, Harry.
And I think this is where it gets critical. If anyone tells you that they know Trump's going to win the election in the swing states, or they know Harris is going to win the election in the swing states, just don't believe them. Because frankly, the pollsters don't know that. And the reason the pollsters don't know that is because they're putting a margin of error of around 4 points for whatever tiny, tiny differences they come up with. And it all depends on how many of the people, even the ones who are registered, leave their sofas on the day. When you talk about the ground game, it's who is enthused enough to get out and actually vote. And the pollsters don't know that, and maybe the voters don't know that themselves either. And so this is why having a kind of operation that is absolutely in the beating heart of, as I say, the swingiest swing state is the thing that Musk thinks is going to make all the difference, right? If you are breathing down people's necks the whole time by offering money, by getting them on the stage, by holding up these massive, great comedy quiz show checks saying you've just won $1 million, then that is probably, he reckons, going to do more than somebody running around going, are you scared of Donald Trump?
Well, let's speak now to Anne Applebaum, staff writer at The Atlantic and author of Autocracy Inc. And Anne, it's great to have you with us. What do you make of what Elon Musk is doing and his involvement in the 2024 presidential election?
So Musk has entered a real gray zone. It is illegal in the United States to pay people to vote or to pay people to register to vote. And he seems to be trying to do something in between, offering them money to sign a petition, but the petition is only open to registered voters. So that might be dodgy. It's actually, and this is related to your bigger question, it's typical of what he does. So Musk's companies have a lot of relationships with the US government, Starlink, the satellite system, SpaceX, the rocket launchers. And in almost each one of them, he frequently creates or comes into conflicts with them. He doesn't want to obey regulations. He doesn't want to hear the answer no when he wants to do a project, and he runs into some kind of obstacle. He's somebody who's seeking to be a business person who simultaneously gets to override the government or decide in place of the government or to ignore regulations and rules and unions and other objections. He has a lot in common with the oligarchs in the autocratic world in that sense. And of course, I'm guessing, I don't know why exactly the real full reason is why he's supporting Trump at this scale, but that seems to be a part of the answer. He wants to be someone who can override the rules. Trump seems to him the candidate who's going to allow him to do that. Trump has made some noises about giving him some kind of role in the new administration if he wins, and that's his involvement. And it's not unheard of in Western politics for people with a lot of money to try and influence political campaigns, but this is different because of the scale and because of the degree to which he seems to want to break the law.
The other thing that strikes me as so, I don't know, concerning, that he has got this social media platform X. He is using it to kind of, say, is this true? And post some absolutely mad conspiracy theory that does grave damage to Harris and boosts Donald Trump. It's not true, but he's got 100 million followers and it's getting extraordinary levels of oxygen.
Look, this is the price we are paying for failing to regulate platforms, for failing to regulate social media. We could have done it. I'm not talking about censoring them. I'm saying we could have given people access to algorithms. We could have let them have influence over what they say. We could have let people control their data. We could have made rules about anonymity. I mean, of those 100 million followers, who knows how many of them are real? Probably most of them aren't. X is a platform that is clearly used. I mean, it's been true for a long time, but it became visible to anybody who was on it in the last few months in particular, is visibly used in an organized way, in an inauthentic way, to push and spread certain kinds of ideas. And Musk obviously understands that perfectly well, and that's what he's doing too.
I mean, he's picked a fight with you on X, hasn't he, for your recent piece in The Atlantic. And I think the column was titled Trump is speaking like Hitler stunned Mussolini, and he sort of said, I can't stop laughing, all the rest of it. What is your tactic when you get that pushback, and do you engage with that? Do you try and call it out? Do you correct what he's saying? Or do you just... I mean, I guess that the point of the site now is mass MAGA infiltration. So what is the point of being there, I guess, is my question.
So I'm still there partly because I feel like someone should talk back. I mean, so when he did that, I posted my column both underneath his tweet and above it saying, you can read what I really said, which I wasn't saying Trump is Hitler. I was saying Trump is using the language of the 1930s in his speeches, which is, not a controversy. So I'm not even the first person to point it out. My column is literally a list of citations from Trump and a list of citations from the dictators of that era who understood that language is inflammatory and that it moved people and excited them, just like it does now. It's not even a very long piece of writing. It's just a presentation of that comparison. And what Musk and others, and he was actually quoting another far-right influencer or whatever they are on X, because they know this is damaging. They know what Trump is doing. And so their tactic is say, ha, 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 isn't this stupid?
Can I just ask bluntly, do you think you are losing the battle? I mean, not just you, but do you think that the battle to disseminate what you're trying to say on X is one that you will never win now? Because what we see from Musk is if he's happy to spend millions daily on trying to influence the election, he's certainly happy to make sure his site only reflects the views of Trump and his mates.
So fortunately, most people on the planet and most Americans are not on X. And there are other places where I also post what I write, multiple other places, in fact. But do I have the right to respond to him or to anybody else who attacks me there? Yes, I do, and I'll continue doing it.
And the other interesting thing about I want to ask you about X is, we went through the psychodrama of the 2016 election. Was there or was there not Russian interference in that election? It seems that social media has never seemed a more ripe outlet for the dissemination of kind of mad conspiracy theory than it is now, with Elon Musk and his algorithm and his willingness to seemingly reproduce any conspiracy theory he likes if he believes it's going to help Donald Trump.
Yes, I mean, you could argue that what he's doing now is exactly what the Russians were seeking to do in 2016, namely to spew conspiracy theories and to spread rumors of all different kinds on the left, on the right, that were designed to make people misunderstand the election or misunderstand Hillary Clinton. You could argue that Musk is now doing that. You don't need a special set of offices in St. Petersburg and Russians who are pretending to be Americans so that they can have Facebook accounts. You don't need it anymore because Musk is doing it himself. We saw what happened in 2016. The Biden administration has had 4 years to think about regulating it. The European Union has had some years to think about regulating it, and no one's done it yet. And so here we are.
Anne Applebaum, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
And what is amazing, really, is the way our language has changed and adapted to cite this, quote this, as election interference, because that's the kind of stuff we normally associate with Russia, with Putin, with disruption of elections right across the world, including in Europe. And there's one very clear case of it happening overnight in Moldova. More on that to come.
So Emily said this was happening overnight. And Emily Maitlis, being Emily Maitlis, was messaging our group at 1:30 this morning, expressing her concerns for Moldovan democracy and Russian involvement in it, and whether the referendum there on whether there should be closer ties with the European Union were causing her to lose sleep. And it's right, when you see what has been happening in that referendum, where, the people have been asked to vote, and Russia has been pouring millions of rubles across the border to pay people, in effect, not to vote for closer ties with Western Europe.
Because essentially this election in Moldova was for two things. One was the presidential election. The result of that is still unknown. We should get it in a week's time or so. But the other was about closer union with the EU. And if you put together everything you know about Ukraine, everything you know about what happened in Georgia earlier this year, you know that Putin's biggest fear is when these former Soviet states, former parts of Greater Russia, move away from his motherland towards the EU. And what was expected to happen in Moldova was a massive landslide victory in favour of greater integration with the EU. And in the end, it came down to a tiny, tiny, razor-thin majority. They've won, but they're just over 50%. It's looking like about 700 or 800 votes in the whole thing.
Wow, and that is incredibly close. But the polls in the lead-up to the election suggested it was overwhelming support for closer ties with the West, closer ties with the European Union. And some really extraordinary stories have come out. I mean, the FT at the weekend reported on some former Moldovan oligarch, Elon Musk, who was kicked out of Moldova for fraud, but is now a Russian citizen, having been spending millions to 130,000 pensioners in Moldova who suddenly saw their pension incomes being bolstered by him giving them money. Oh, by the way, you're not going to vote for closer integration. And there's a BBC producer who's been quoted. She saw someone going to vote, an old lady going to vote, and says, where do I get paid now? Where do I get paid?
It's not quite the winter fuel cuts, is it?
No.
It's literally somebody going in. And this is what the President Sandu has been describing for weeks now. She said there is an unprecedented assault on the democratic process by what she called foreign forces, a euphemism for Russia. And Moldovan authorities had described this fight against what they say is the sort of multi-limbed, sort of Hydra-like network of Kremlin proxies. In other words, you won't ever be able to trace it right back to Putin himself, but it will be everyone who works for or under or with Putin sending illegal money intended to buy votes. And Moldovan law enforcement think that Russia has spent about $100 million on these operations, voter bribery, using funds brought in by, as you say, kind of mules, money mules, arriving in, from Moscow and trying to find any way they can, adapting any way they can to get the money to the people who could shift that vote.
Well, they've been employing sniffer dogs at the airport, not to look for drugs, but to look for cash. Look for cash that's coming over the border from Russia into Moldova, where the cash was going to be used to bribe people not to vote for closer ties with Europe. And meanwhile, you've got someone like Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, saying, just to say that, should you vote for this, Moldova could be the next Ukraine. Yeah. That's going to send a bit of a chill down the spine, I'd have thought, to the average Moldovan, when you see kind of the relentless bombardment that has taken place of Ukraine since 2022.
I think, Sandu reckoned, this is the president who reckons that they were trying to convert or buy 300,000 votes. Now, obviously, it's kind of impossible to say exactly what the margin should have been. But when all the polls were showing a healthy lead for EU engagement and it came down to just over the wire, you realise that, it can work. Of course it does work. You target the right people and you end up with a diminishing scale. And I guess the question is, at what point do we recognise, Western democracies, recognise that this is going on, this is changing minds, this is making countries like Moldova more vulnerable, not just to Russian financial influence, but ultimately, I guess, to military influence, right?
But also, if you'd have said to me 3 weeks ago that I was going to be linking, or we were going to be linking, money in elections in the US presidential election to something that was unfolding in Moldova, I'd have said, what the hell is the link between the two?
Yeah.
The link is pretty clear. You can join the dots. Elon Musk in Pennsylvania, win $1 million if you've registered to vote and you like this pro-Trump pack. Moldova, money coming across the border, vote the right way.
Yeah.
These are things that belong in the 19th century. It's the rotten boroughs. It's the old machine politics, going back decades. And yet here we are in 2024 with all the sophistication of election monitoring and all the rest of it.
We've even done away with hanging chads.
Yeah, and money is buying votes. Not buying influence. Money is buying votes. That's scary.
If you cast your mind back 8 years ago to the question of Russian influence on the US election, which was proven, and Putin and Trump then went on to have very close ties. There was always the assumption that Putin was much happier having Trump in power, that he would have been having Hillary because he thought he was
He
more...
said so explicitly at the news conference in Helsinki.
Easier to manipulate, more malleable, all the rest of it. Now you've got a place where Putin doesn't even have to worry about America because it's all in-house, right? Musk's doing it for him. So, job done. He can concentrate on Moldova, rest of Europe.
The end of globalisation saw jobs coming onshore. Elon Musk has onshored political interference in a way that would have simply been unimaginable. COVID has got a lot to answer for.
American jobs for American workers, right?
We'll be back after the break. The banner headline on Sky News this morning was King Heckled. And the king...
Who's King Heckled?
Yeah, King Heckled. He was succeeding Charles III.
Oh, right, okay, fine.
King Heckled, also known as King Charles III, good gag, mateless, after his appearance at Parliament House in Canberra in Australia, when an Indigenous rights protester, Lydia Thorpe, said, you are not our king, we are a sovereign country, and, the king heckled. But actually, maybe the headline should have been not King Heckled, but actually it should have been King barely heckled at all, given the mood in Australia for republicanism. And you'd have to say, I would think if you're Buckingham Palace, you think, oh, that's not bad.
You're a man who spends a lot of time in Australia, and presumably you know a few of these characters sort of better than we do. Lydia Thorpe is somebody who's come onto my radar because she is, it seems, the lone voice in many of these debates, which seem to have been resolved actually around republicanism in Australia and whether or not they want to sort of have the king as their head of state or not, because she is the one who always raised her voice at moments like this. She was very, very prominent in the referendum they had a year ago.
The voice referendum.
Which was on Indigenous rights, which the Prime Minister Albanese lost.
Yeah, and this is Lydia Thorpe today in Canberra.
Give us our land back! Give us what you stole from us! Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people! You destroyed our land! Give us a treaty! We want a treaty in this country! You are a genocider!
So she is dragged away. The King and the Queen look on impassively and don't seem to react at all to it. And I kind of think it was sort of baked into the share price that something like this was going to happen on their trip to Australia. And as I say, I think that actually what people will take away from this is that the protests haven't been as marked or as great as maybe they thought they would be. And you talked about Albanese having lost the voice referendum on Indigenous rights and how that should be integrated into law. You know, you've lost one referendum. You're not likely to embark on another one in a hurry where you might lose that as well and undermine your political authority. So I think for the time being, frankly, although the king may not be on the $5 note, which he's not in Australia, is there going to be any appetite to make any further moves in Australia towards independence, towards, breaking the relationship with the monarchy?
Look, she is an interesting voice, Lydia Thorpe, right?
Yeah.
She's the first Aboriginal Australian senator. I think she first got elected into the state of Victoria in 2017 and then she went federal in 2020. And she's somebody who I think has made her position to be that voice of opposition within the Senate. She's made no bones about it. She added words like the colonising in reference to Queen Elizabeth II. She'll raise her fist in the Parliament, to show her dissent. And she said very outspokenly, she signed up to become a senator in the colonial project. And that wasn't an easy decision for me. In other words, I know we use this phrase jokingly, but she's literally fighting the establishment from within. So that is her role, right?
Exactly. Her supporters would have been disappointed if she hadn't.
Yeah.
And equally, thousands of people were on the streets in Canberra today cheering the King and the Queen. And, I'm not saying that's representative of where the Australian beating heart is.
Why do you think it is, though? I mean, honestly, do you think that people
I think it's pretty
don't
split.
care or they love them or they hate them?
I think it's a bit like America where there's a fascination. And if you're, as you say, I go over to Australia a lot to see our son. It's because it's entertainment. They're on the news the whole time. Anything that the royal family does gets a lot of news coverage in a way that ordinary people just don't get the same. I mean, Taylor Swift does, but, it's the royalty is big news. It's a bit of an anachronism. And yeah, we should be a republic, but can anyone be bothered right now against the issues of cost of living and all the rest of it in Australia and what's happening with China? I don't think there's much appetite.
We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.